Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Sales Entrepreneur. I am Daniel McComber, and with me today is Ben Jordan, the CEO and founder of Action Plumbing. It's good to have you here, Ben.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I love it because I was telling you before we talked, before you had any kind of social media or anything, I had heard about you from a few different people and how kind of influential you are and the kind of man you are. And so it's fun now that we've gotten this started. You have your social media kind of starting and everything, and now you're being on podcasts. And I'm just kind of curious, what kind of sparked this sudden interest in putting yourself out there?
Well, honestly, like being in the trades, we're real blue collar, it's like we get dirty, work with our hands and stuff, so like social media and stuff like that, it's never really been a thing.
Right.
And, we're getting more and more every day into helping other businesses and doing other things with other businesses where we're helping them through their journey. And so just like every new phase in life, you got to turn over a new page. And, it was time for me to get on social media and kind of just air out there what I do and who I am, I've never really been one for a spotlight, never really one to get on the camera, but it's one of those things. It's a crazy good tool, and we're going to use it.
Awesome. I mean, building a business, a multi, $1 million business compared to being like on social media. I mean, it's pretty hard, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I tell people all the time, I'd much rather go through the process of building a multi-million-dollar business than shooting video or getting on social media.
It's difficult. Yeah. Even I've had to go through like this learning curve, and I grew up with it in my hands, but well, that's amazing. Well, I mean, I wanted to hear a little bit about your story just because, like I've gotten bits and pieces of it from people. And I think that the cool thing about your business is that there's so many different levels to kind of like being a trade worker, right? Or being just in the service industry, right? You could just be like kind of you can create a job for yourself. You can actually create a company where you're employing others. You can be an entrepreneur. There's so many different levels to it. And so to kind of take it from where you've taken it is pretty huge. And so I guess kind of if we get a little more about your background, I mean, what have you always had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit about you, or were there things that you kind of learned in your childhood that help you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, no, like I grew up in an extremely large family, we live in Utah. And so when I tell people that I have a lot of brothers and sisters there, they don't really blink. But like in Colorado, telling people you had 14 brothers and sisters, was like,
no,
it was like, okay, and so my dad was extremely strict, so like he was like, okay, I think it was a tool for him, it was like, I had so many kids. So now I'm going to make sure that they're busy full time. Right. And so he owned a business. And we did appliance repair. So we did service. So people would call us like, hey, their fridge is broken or their washer is broken. And we'd go out and we'd fix whatever problem they had. Yeah. So since I was probably 8-9 years old, I remember going out with him. And then, my mom, unfortunately, she passed away early on. Because I was like 13 when my mom passed away. And then the business got to really where it was struggling. And so my dad really needed us to go help out. And so I remember the summer of the year I turned 14. So I was 13, I turned 14. And I remember that summer we worked nonstop. So it was like every day, all day, getting there, we're answering phones. So like I was a receptionist. Yeah. And so I would answer phones. And in those days, in Denver, it was crazy. Like I think my dad had 30 technicians and they were running, 10 calls a day.
Wow.
I remember, getting there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd be scheduling calls until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Just crazy.
And I guess, is that before the business was like going through hard times, or is that
That
after?
was after. That was like, because my mom, she had a lot to do. We were a family-owned business. It was smaller, and so my mom, she ran a whole bunch of the stuff. And so when she got sick, my dad really had to take a step back. It was really trying to take care of her, trying to get her better. She ended up passing away, and my, so everything was hectic. My dad didn't run a lot of the stuff that he ran. So one of my uncles, he stepped in and was running all the stuff, and so they really needed help in areas that, you couldn't just really find guys for, so like the office was easy to plug kids in. And so we answered, and we knew how to answer phones. But like for me in my journey, I look back now and I'm like, oh man, at 13, I learned how to talk to customers on the phone.
Adults. I mean, for a normal 13-year-old nowadays, like I feel like they don't have any interaction with adults unless it's a teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
And we were dealing with angry customers. We were dealing with happy customers. We were dealing with customers that were frantic, like their fridge is leaking all over their hardwood floor, or whatever is going on. And so we had to be able to deal with it. Okay, now we're going to get it over here. And then like my older brothers, I have 2 older brothers, and they were dispatching. So they had to start figuring out like routes to send guys to, and they were 15 and 16 years old.
Wow.
So it's like, you're learning how to deal with routes, and then like we would answer BBB was real big back in the day. Right. So you had like BBB complaints we had to respond to.
What?
Google reviews wasn't a real big thing.
Yeah.
So like you really didn't have like the whole Google side of it. Like my dad, he advertised in the Yellow Pages.
Oh,
that's how we got our that's how we got our business, was the Yellow Pages. So
that is incredible. So I mean, underage laws kind of went out the window. Like we're going to use this as a family. Well, I mean, I feel like when it's a family-owned business, that's like implied. Like, everyone's got a hand in it some way or another. I remember my mom; she had like this clothing store that we ran out of the basement of our house, and I just remember going to like the fairs and the carnivals and stuff like that, and I couldn't just sit behind the table and just wait for people to come talk to me. No, I had to be out in front of the table, pulling people towards the table. Like my dad's teaching me these sales concepts at a very young age without me even knowing it. So by the time I get a little older, I'm like, yeah, it's normal to like just be able to pull someone from what they're doing and grab their attention and bring them over to what you're trying to show them. And it's like, oh no, that's actually a skill that I had developed.
Oh yeah.
And so I guess it sounds like you did this with your dad for quite a long time. Is it, I guess, what I've learned is that some people, when they see their parents or their fathers go through entrepreneurial ventures, it can either kind of discourage them from wanting to do it or just get them really excited about it.
No, that's exactly, what it was. I tell a lot of people, my dad, he created a bunch of lions, and so like he took us all the way through the process. He went from answering phones to dispatching to running actual calls, right? We learned how to fix the appliances. We ran the calls, and then we went from the actual running of the calls to training other technicians. So we'd have guys running with us. We'd be in the back training guys how to fix the stuff, right? How to sell, because that's where I learned how to sell, right? Is like, but that whole process taught me how to sell, right? So I remember when I was 16, the year I turned 16, I got my license, I went on the road, and from the end of school, ended like the middle of May to middle of August, I made like $38,000 that year.
Dang, the original summer sales guy.
Yeah, like and it was just me running calls, and like I remember like I had friends that their parents didn't even make that kind of money, and at 16 I was like, oh man, I thought it was just normal.
Yeah.
And then, we start getting older and older and older, and then, I start getting better and better working with, more high-tech appliances, and then we worked on to HVAC, and so it's like the ticket started getting bigger and bigger, but the foundation was there.
Wow, that's awesome. And so I guess eventually did you kind of start your own company, so to speak, or is it kind of still a collaboration of what your dad did?
No, like we're from Denver, so we're from the Denver, Aurora area, and I went on a mission for my church for 2 years. I got home, and I had a wrestling scholarship, and I went to school for half a semester. I got on the wrestling team. Yeah. I got married right before I went to my first semester, and so I was
boy.
Man,
student married athlete.
Yeah, man. It was crazy. Like I figured out like I wasn't learning anything at school, right? And wrestling, wasn't going to be paying the bills. Like it paid for everything I needed, but like, I wanted to have a family. I wanted to get everything going. Yeah. And I was just like, this isn't for me. And so I ended up moving out. I moved out here to Utah, and I was helping one of my uncles, and he runs a HVAC company here. And so I was helping him out. We were running some stuff, and we were actually on a job. My second oldest brother and I, we were on a job, and we met a plumber. And plumbing industry is extremely hard to get into. Like the licensing is hard. Like you got to pretty much have a doctorate. You got worth the time to get into the plumbing industry.
Wow. Okay.
And so we always knew we wanted to get into plumbing, and we met a plumber on a job, and we were like, hey, like, we would like to come work for you. He was just a man in a van. And he's like, man, I'm really not too interested in having employees and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, we run into customers all the time that need water heaters. We can't do it because we're not licensed to do it. What if we sell it for you and have you come and install it, and we'll give you the money?
Oh.
And the guy's like, Kind of was like, yeah, I've never heard of anybody doing that.
Yeah, is there a catch? Like what?
And he's like, is there a catch or something? And they're like, no, like this, we just want to prove to you that we know what we're doing. Like, this is what we do,
Yeah.
And the next job we went to, my brother calls me, he says, hey, I sold this water heater, call that guy. So we called him up, said, hey, I sold the water heater for you, like, come and do it,
Yeah.
Like, we're going to give it to you.
Yeah.
And my brother had already uninstalled it. Like, we already knew how to do it, right? We already knew all the stuff. We just needed to be able to get, past that barrier of entry.
Yeah.
So the guy was like, man, these guys are crazy. And so I remember he's like, okay, come and do an interview with me. And he was just a man van. I went to his parents' house and he did an interview with me in the basement. They had like a massage parlor.
Nice.
I literally was sitting on like one of those massage chairs, like this close to him.
Yeah.
And he was sitting on one end, I was sitting on the other. We had our interview and he was ready to go.
Wow.
Like, he's like, okay, I'll have you come work for me.
Dang.
The first
interview is pretty much just you selling him
Yeah.
more, right?
I was just telling him, like, Anna, it. And honestly, I knew how to do small things, but plumbing's complex.
Okay.
A lot of people don't understand, like, plumbing is pretty complex. Like, doing the stuff and make sure it's done right, because you don't want to leak, because water can cause serious damage. So first job we go to, he's like, hey, I need you to install a toilet over here. I'm like, hey, sweet. I go to install it. I'd never installed a toilet before. Like, never. And so I put it all together. I'm pretty handy. I forgot the seal between the tank and the bowl. I forgot the seal. I put it on there, and he was doing a remodel in the basement. We were running water lines and everything. And I remember I flushed the toilet, and the water goes poof everywhere and like started leaking through. And so he come upstairs, and he was like, what's going on? I'm like, oh man, I forgot this thing right here. No worries. He was like, okay. And at the end of the day, he's like, hey, let's go grab some dinner. I'm like, all right, let's go grab some dinner. And at that dinner, he tells me, he's like, man, I don't know if it's going to work out. And I already quit my job working with my uncle, right? And I had a pretty good job over there. I was making good money, And I told him, I was just like, man, honestly, I already quit my other job. Like, I'm all in right here. And I told him, I'm like, I promise you, if you give me a chance, you'll never regret it. But I promise you, if you don't give me a chance, you'll always regret it, because I'm that kind of a guy. I'm that good.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me, and I said, I'll tell you, I'll make it even easier. He's like, well, I can't give up my only van to somebody who really doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I get it. I said, I'll run out of my car. My wife and me had a little Camry. That's the only car we had. Little Toyota Camry. I don't know if you ever seen a plumber show up to a job in a Toyota Camry.
No, not a plumber.
That's me.
Yeah.
Okay.
The trunk can only fit so many supplies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I worked for like 2 or 3 weeks. He'd send me to the most bogus calls like he had, just stuff he didn't want to go to. And I was crushing it. I would go there and I would just, I knew from when I was younger, if you just go in there and understand the customer and have their best, their best interest in mind, and you're only focused to make sure that they're taken care of, not just whatever they called you for, but hey, I'm a plumber, I'm going to be in your house, like I'm going to make sure that there's nothing going to cause problems, because the only time something's wrong with plumbing is when it's a catastrophe.
Right.
So I check it, and I was crushing it. Customers loved me. I was making great money, and the guy's like, oh my goodness. I'm like, okay, well, I am going to give you a van now.
Nice.
So I worked for him for 10 months, and I asked him, hey, would you sell a business? And he's like, because he would always tell me he wanted to get out and stuff. So we made him an offer on the business, and he accepted. So he owner financed us on a little bit. We had to come up with a lot of money. Yeah. He wanted a lot of money down, and it's like, in those days, we didn't have very much money down,
Yeah.
So we were working anything that we could do. Like I was telling a lot of guys, we had an old folks community, like a bunch of mobile homes.
Okay.
That was a friend of a church member that called me out there, needed just something fixed, and I ended up replumbing her house. Well, all the neighbors wanted me to start doing theirs too. And so I'd work all day plumbing, and then I'd work all night replumbing these houses to save up enough money to buy the business. And then I'd go back to work the next day, and then I'd sleep one night, and then just start the whole thing over. And it took us 10 months or 11 months to plumb that whole entire community. And we were doing it dirt cheap. That's why they all wanted us to do it. But we were making enough where we could save and put the down on the business.
You keep saying it was you and
my brother and I.
Your brother.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. But he was still working when I was plumbing for that guy. He was still working for my uncle.
Yeah. Because he wanted the more secure money. I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Yeah. That makes sense.
And we didn't want to leave him high and dry. And so he counted on us quite a bit. And my brother was making really good money over there. He was selling, and so that's where we started. And then we bought the business and we went all in. It was just me and him.
Yeah. And what year was that you bought the business?
2015.
2015.
November of 2015.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it's an awesome story because one, like you're bold so many times in that. You're like, you're going to regret it. It's like, well, you're like, what, 20 something years old. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean I'm going to regret this? Right. But I like how much you brought up sales in that. And it's different kind of sales, right? I mean, there's door-to-door sales, cold calling. I guess you'd show up and then was the idea to kind of like upsell them on more things that they needed done in the home?
Yeah. So like the craziest thing about what we do, is when somebody has like let's say your faucet's dripping or your toilet has a leak, when you're calling me out there to look at that, 99% of the time, people don't budget for plumbing problems, right? So if there is a bigger problem that you see when I pull that toilet up, if like the flange is broken or something, there's a bigger problem, or like the pipe's leaking in the wall and you don't know what's going on, it's extremely hard to get a customer on board. And it's like, at that point, it's like, oh my goodness. Now, I tell my wife all the time, I'm a Grinch at every Christmas.
Oh, right.
Because like, that's how it is. It's like, I go to somebody's house and I'm like, please be something simple, and it's something bad,
Way worse,
and it's just like, I tell everybody it's extremely easy to go to somebody's home and to make whatever the sell is for whatever they're doing. It's extremely hard to take care of them the way that they need to be taken care of so they'll be a long-time customer.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right, because they don't budget for it.
No.
They're not budgeting for these plumbing problems, especially like sewer lines. We specialize in sewer lines.
Oh my gosh.
8 to 10 feet deep, and it's like, only time it's bad is when it's backing up into your home and you got stuff
I'll
everywhere.
Show you a picture. The first property I ever bought was a duplex down in Provo, and we moved into the side that wasn't renovated and started renovating it. And yeah, sure enough, the tenant texted me one night like, "Hey, like the water's kind of coming up through like the
floor
sewer and the toilet's not flushing really." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," I was freaking out. Long story short, a week prior to that, some guy. UPS guy, and there's snow on the ground, but he backed up into my yard instead of like the driveway to drop off a package. Well, when he backed up into the yard, I guess it was a heavy enough truck that it hit like some part of the ground in front of the home. Anyways, it just broke the pipe going from the house out into the street.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you got to get a backhoe, right? And then it's like, well, this is 1970, so there's a good chance it's asbestos down there. We might have to do more. I'm like freaking out. This is my first property ever.
And it's not cheap.
No. I sunk $7,500 into the dirt, literally. And then I had to grow the grass back in the wintertime. So I just remember I didn't budget it, and it's extremely hard. But at the same time, the guys that I was working with, like, they took good care of us. And I mean, as much as they could. And they got the job done. And I ended up selling the property anyways. But the funny thing is that we didn't budget for it. And I can definitely see how you come in to a homeowner, right, will greatly determine if that person's going to go with you again in the future, or if they're willing to like, hey, well, why don't you look at X, Y, and Z? It's that trust aspect, right? And I feel like with trade workers and with service, it's really hard to get their trust right away because they know, an average homeowner knows, the more you can find wrong with my house, the more money you make. And then the more you tell me, the more it is. And so I've always had a really hard time as a salesman listening to somebody and feeling like they're not trying to sell me. And so I guess what lessons did you learn? And maybe for anybody else out there that's kind of in a similar situation, what lessons did you learn that helped you like gain their trust and help them know that you had their best interest at heart?
Well, we kind of have a system that we play. We call it our perfect service call, right? So when we're thinking about it, our perfect service call doesn't start when I get to your home. My perfect service call, it starts the night before, right? How am I looking, right? A lot of trades guys, they don't understand like, hey, if you look dirty and you look greasy and you look grungy, you know what I mean? Like, you smell like smoke or whatever, when you're walking at home, you're automatically going to put them on the defense, right? Because they already understand, like, hey, plumbers make good money. So the more they find, exactly what you said, the more they find, the more money they're going to make, right?
Yeah.
But we start the night before and then we come in, we're training, we get our preparation.
Step, right?
You get the preparation done, right? And then before I ever send one of my guys to a job, right?
Yeah.
they listen to exactly what that customer had to say on the phone. So all of our stuff, when they call in, they say, hey, you know, my toilet's leaking and X, Y, and Z. They're understanding, okay, I know exactly what this guy is going through, right? Or this gal, right? And they
So
say,
they're not showing up and what a lot of people do that drive every homeowner crazy. So what's the problem? It's like, I told your person on the phone like for half an hour what the problem is.
yeah. And they show up, and that automatically makes them think that they're not prepared. Right. So it's like, okay, who is this? And so when we show up to where you park your van on the street, right? We don't pull into people's driveways, because first thing they're saying to you is like, is your van gonna leak oil all over my driveway? You know, it's like where you park on the street, right? And we're not driving one of those big, you know, creeper white vans. You know, all of our stuff is completely wrapped. They understand who's coming to the home, right? So they know, because they've already looked at your reviews. Okay, they've already looked at your reviews. They know who you are. So when you show up and it's like, boom, okay, these guys are legit. Right. And then we walk up to the door, and I lay out a mat, right? I call it my red carpet treatment, right? So the guys lay out the mat, and it has a logo on there. And I tell a lot of people, like, I ask them, like, why do you think we lay out a mat on the floor? And they're like, well, because we want them to see the logo. And I said, no, they already know who we are, right? I want them to look down at the red mat and see that I got booties on my feet. Right? Because what I'm doing, you ever seen the movie Inception?
Of course, yeah.
So, like, you know how they program the mind, you know, the subconscious, right? And I use that movie. I tell my guys all the time, it's one of the greatest sales movies ever. Because, like, if you think about sales, right, and you think about, like, how the mind works, the more you programmed their mind, right, the more you program them to understand what you're going to be telling them, the easier it is for them to make a decision, and not make just a regular decision, but an educated decision.
Yes.
Right? So when I show up to the house and I knock on the door, right? I don't ring the doorbell. I knock on the door, and they answer it. I'm here to give you a bid, right? Because that's going to put in their mind, when I do give them an estimate, like, oh yeah, just leave the bid. No, I'm not there to leave a bid. I'm there to take care of your problem, right? So I'm like, I'm here to fix what you got going on, right? And whatever it is, you know, I just give a general statement. But when they see the booties on my feet, they're like, ding, check mark in their mind. Hey, this guy cares about my home.
Absolutely. Cares about the home. And it's one of those, in business, you have to find the little things that provide so much more value to the homeowner that cost you next to nothing. And booties cost a cent and provide so much. It also gives the appearance of like, oh man, these guys are like legit high level. So, I mean, that's a pretty detailed, and I could tell because the way, when I do my training to my sales guys for solar, I give a training in a very similar way where I have every little piece detailed, boom, 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 boom. And so I could tell you've put a lot of thought into this. So would you say you're the one that kind of came up with the, I guess, kind of sales process, or like the process, or is that something that you had to hire out because you weren't good at it? Or?
No, it was just a trial and error, you know? Like we were in the business, and I just started picking up on little things, you know, the little things that worked, because me not coming from a plumbing background, right? I came from a service background, but like when you're going in and you're doing a $300 appliance repair, a $400 appliance repair, that's nothing compared to going in and telling them that their sewer's bad and you're going to pay $7-8 grand, you know what I mean? Exactly. And then I'm going to destroy your front yard in the process, you know? So like when I'm coming into that home, whether there's sewage on the floor or not, and I know that there's sewage on the floor, right? I am literally putting my booties on, and I'm walking down there, and I'm saying, hey, don't worry, I'm here to take care of your problem, right? That's the whole entire thing, because in all reality, the customers, you know, their expectations and their ultimate like happiness is how I get paid, right? I tell everybody that every customer is my boss. They could fire me at any time. Wow. You know what I mean? So
it takes a little bit of humility, by the way, to look at it that way.
And that's just that's the thing in the service industry, you know, it's like every customer I go to, you know, is my boss. You know, we have a saying in our office. I have it up on the wall, but it's like every call is an opportunity for me to have my dreams become reality. Every call is an opportunity to make my dreams become reality, right? Because this trade's changed my life. Right. I went from not being able to barely, you know, pay my rent, you know, my wife going to the store and having to put food back, to, you know, making 7-8 figures a year, you know what I mean? And building a $30-40 million business, you know, because of that customer experience. Right.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, at every point in, so yeah, I guess in every single entrepreneur's journey, it gets to a point where they kind of become, they turn from like a founder, and then they kind of turn into like the CEO, or they turn into, you know, a chair member. So I mean, 2015, shoot, I mean, that's a pretty short time period to get to where you're at now. How was that scaling process? What are some lessons you learned during that?
Well, from 2015 to 2017, we were in a process of like, okay, are we going to do indoor plumbing? Are we going to do water heaters? Are we going to do remodels or whatever? There's so many different types. So we really didn't know what we were doing. We were surviving, learning as fast as we possibly could. In 2017, we rebranded. And we figured out, I went to a lady's house and I remember I was cleaning her drain. And I told her exactly what's going on. She says, well, the router guy, right? The router guy said this. I was like, man, I never had somebody tell me, me as a plumbing professional that, hey, the router guy said this. So we changed our name, right? We changed our name to Router. We put Router in our name, right? And at that time it was Connections Plumbing, right? And so we turned it to 24-hour Router Connections. And boom, overnight. And we started branding ourselves Utah's number one sewer company.
Wow.
Right. And so overnight we became the Router guy.
Yeah.
And it's like we started, and then we went full in on sewer lines. Right. That's all we did. We specialized in it.
Oh, okay.
And I tell people all the time, like, sewer lines is like the Mercedes-Benz of plumbing. Like anybody can hook up pipes. Anybody can run water lines through the walls. That's easy. Anybody can install a water heater. Yeah. But when you're digging 10, 12 feet under the ground and then having to, insert a liner or fix sewer line that is 4 inches in diameter, right? And you got to shoot it 100 feet and not mess it up because you're under the city street and all this other stuff, right? Yeah. That becomes like you're like a Ferrari dealer at that point. Like you only want to take your Ferrari to something that works on Ferraris.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't want to trust that kind of stuff with other people. And so that's why we branded and we worked extremely hard to become those guys. I think last year we shot 48 or 49,000 feet of liner.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
a trenchless sewer repair. So it's like we dig that, access the hole, and I can fix your entire sewer from that one hole.
Wow. That's crazy. So, I mean, that's a lot of growth in that. So you figured out what you wanted to do. And then I guess what would you attribute, if you're having like business principles, what would you attribute to the fast amount of growth that you had? I mean, is it just customer service and hiring lots of really high quality people? Or so in 2017 we did the rebrand, and then I was always in this process of like, we'd hire a guy like had plumbing experience, and then he would leave, and then we'd hire another guy and he'd leave, and I'm like, man, this turnover rate is crazy. And I said, you know what, I'm done hiring people from the industry. I said, I'm just going to find guys and I'm going to train them. Right. So I'm going to find young guys, right? Young guys that are hungry. I always tell everybody it's easier to train a salesman to plumb than it is a plumber to sell. So like I would find guys that had some sort of sales ability, right? Yeah. Or had the want to have sales ability. Not even guys that had sales ability. Yeah. If you came to my office, you'd see guys like, holy cow, that are $3-4 million a year sales guys that literally couldn't have sold a cheeseburger at McDonald's. Oh wow.
Okay. And so we find these guys that have the want, and actually guys that were pretty good, right? Yeah. And we said, hey, we're just going to train you. So we have come up with a training program. We trained them how to do their job, right? And how to be proficient at it. And the greatest thing for me is, I don't get the bad habits.
Wow. I wonder what was the pull? Like, what was because you have to sell these sales guys on coming to work for you. I mean, in sales, typically you're making pretty good money. And so I don't know the plumbing, like how great of money they can make. Were they just wanting to get out of the space they were in usually, or
it was
like the idea of working with their hands?
Yeah, I think it was more of like a career type thing. They wanted to be a part of something, and that's what I've really figured out is that these sales guys, bounce around from door to door to pest to solar to all these different things, right? And most of the time they're doing summer sales and they're not very happy or whatever it is, right? And so it's like we figured out that if we would recruit in a certain way where it's like, hey, this is not just this is a sales job. First of all, we're salespeople, right? Second of all, this is a career. And not only is this a career, but this is a career of changing people's lives every single day.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're going to that catastrophe, and so you can help that customer, and that customer is going to be a customer for life.
Wow. Yeah, that is a very interesting way of looking at it. I really doubt there's very many plumbers out there looking for like tradesmen as salesmen. But the crazy thing is you got to put a lot of time into these guys to get them going. Right?
Lots of time.
So you had this background in being good at sales. Did you know that you had a knack for training, I suppose, like sales training? Because that's not every sales rep can be a sales trainer.
No, like I tell my guys all the time, I say, you know, most of the guys there got more sales ability and more training skills in one pinky finger than I got in my whole body. But the thing is I figured out that if guys, you know, they had a dream and you matched it with, you know, purpose, you could get them to do anything, right? And we have guys showing up that don't have any experience, right? That are able to make, you know, $200,000-$300,000 a year, and that's with zero experience.
Wow.
Right? Just because they plug into a system that we created, right? And the system was generated over years. You know, I took everything that I had, right? Yeah. And I have a lot of help. I have a lot of brothers. So I have, you know, I have 3 brothers right now that work with me.
Oh, cool.
And, you know, they're incredible. You know, they make the world go round for me. And that's what's given me the time. You know, I tell a lot of entrepreneurs, like, if you really want to have, you know, financial success, don't work in your business, work on your business, right? And they gave me that opportunity. You know, I recruited all my brothers, and I have guys that, you know, I went to school with back in Colorado that we recruited out here, and cousins that come work for me, you know, and I brought them all together, and we all had the same, you know, dreams and goals, and we just said, hey, you're good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this, and like we're gonna separate it out. Yeah. And we're gonna dominate the market.
Wow. Oh, I mean, what about all like the people that say don't like work with family and stuff like that? You just threw caution to the wind, I guess, or
yeah, like you know, I got lucky that I had family, but like, you know, I have 3 family members that work with me, and the rest are people that we've trained and found. You know, it's like I you know, Austin's one of my right-hand guys. And it's funny story. I went on a mission with him. He was an AP in my mission. Oh. And then when he came to Utah, we were just hanging out. Yeah. And I invited him over to my house, and he was just like, what the heck's going on, you know? And he's asked me one day, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh dude, I'm a plumber. He's like, you're a plumber? And like, and so he got really curious, and he's like, hey man, like literally, when can I come work for you? And it was like the first time me and him hung out in like 10 years. That's and it was just like, well, 2 weeks, you know? Yeah. He's like, okay, I'll be there in 2 weeks. What? And so like, you know, people really see it, and he was in sales, right? And people see, you know, and they're like, okay, when we were first starting out, it was a little harder because we were, you know, just a couple guys in a warehouse, you know. Now it's a lot easier to recruit once you've built things going. But like, even back in those days, we just, you know, got the guys, we would get guys coming in, hey, tell your buddies about it, you know, like, I don't know how many times we got people's friends coming in, hey, I want a job, you know, like.
Jeez, do you think, I mean, we're in Utah, right? So was it just they didn't want to do summer sales kind of a thing, and they're like, I'll try anything else? Or were you getting people that like had like some of like a passion for like working like manual labor? Because again, they're not plumbers, so where is this desire coming from?
Literally, it was just, you know, like yesterday I had one of the guys, I was talking to one of my guys, and he came from Verizon.
Oh, okay.
And he's been with me for 6 years now, 6.5 years, almost 7 years.
Yeah.
And he was telling me yesterday, is like, man, like I made $14,000 at Verizon in 6 months. And the first 6 months he worked for me, he made like 40,000.
Wow.
Right. He's just like, I never knew that I could do that.
Yeah.
I never knew that within 6 years, I could not be living with my mom anymore. I could have my daughter live with me. I could buy a house. I could have the cars that I want, all because I learned how to work in my hands and I had a little bit of sales ability.
Dang, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, because sales is something that you can teach people, and it's always a question of whether or not they're going to like grasp onto it. Because some people will just, I don't know if it's their personality or what, they'll just kind of, they'll try it and they'll reject it almost. Whereas I like the idea that like, hey, you know, if you have some sales ability, we'll train you on that, but then we're also going to add more value by training you on how to have this, you know, skill, this craft, I suppose, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think if you give them the dream, right, and you sell them on the dream, like, hey, this is where you could be. Because, you know, me 9 years ago, I was literally sitting there. I tell my guys all the time, I was sitting in that chair, right? Like, if you look at my life and you're like, dang, man, I like where he lives. You know, we have guys come over to my house all the time. I have, you know, like guys will call me up like, hey, can I drive your car? I want to take my girlfriend to dinner. Sure, come get it, you know? And so like, I tell them all the time, like, hey, if you want the life, you can have it. Because I did it and I'm not very smart, right? But the thing is that I had we constantly are training, right? You're constantly moving them along. And not only are we involving them, but we're involving their spouse or their girlfriend or their families too. Because if you involve all of those people, right, it now becomes not just, his decision, but it's everybody's decision. And then you're getting all the support from everybody to help them grow, and they grow 10 times faster.
Wow. So out of curiosity, within the kind of sales world, scarcity mindset it's really bad, right? It's really hard to find a manager that doesn't have scarcity and mindset and who's, willing to do what's in the best interest of the salesman, right? So you said something just then that sparked this idea that, you're proof that anyone can do it. Now, I don't know if I've heard of too many like plumbers that go to people's house that are making, millions of dollars. The idea came from kind of building the business and building the brand and everything like that. So out of curiosity, how do you think that you're able to keep a good mindset, avoid a scarcity mindset, have like an abundance mindset while teaching these guys these very valuable abilities?
Well, it's like we tell them all the time, there's two types of people. There's entrepreneurs and then there's intrapreneurs, right? And the people that are intrapreneurs, they're just as valuable as the entrepreneurs, right? Because they're allowing the person that's an entrepreneur to, and Andy says this all the time, right? He's like, man, if I could have found something like I have right now, I'd just go work for somebody. Me too. That's what I tell people all the time. Like the stress and everything else that comes with running a business, it's like, gosh, it sucks sometimes, right? And it's 24/7, 365. Like people think, oh, I'm going to own a business. I'm going to go start a business because I want to get time off. And then, no, you don't really get time off, right? No. But the fact of the matter is that if you can't, work for it and you can't find it, build it. Right. And so that was what we did. And then, we teach that to the guys. It's like, hey, we give them the ability to be able to create their own world within working with us. Nice, it's like, I tell guys all the time, it's like, they say, oh, I work for this guy. And it's like, no, you don't work for me. You work with me. Like we're a huge team here. You know what I mean? It's like, I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for that guy. Yeah. Doesn't matter how good of a salesman they are, or if they're the guys that clean the toilets at the shop. You know what I mean? It's like everybody has a certain position, and everybody has a certain, responsibility that works a part of the whole entire team. Yeah. And that's what's helped us scale incredibly fast. From absolutely. Going in 2015 to 0 employees, and now we have 160 employees here in Salt Lake. Wow. So it's been one of those things where it's like just getting the guys to buy in, because like I was telling you, when we incorporate their family, and we talk about faith, we talk about fitness. Nice. Fitness is a big part of what we do. Yeah. And in blue collar world, it's non-existent. It's not, is it? Yeah. Non-existent, right?
Ever since the friggin' dawn of time, you had the plumber with the butt crack.
Exactly.
And stuff like that, right? And it's like, how can you expect to follow these, societal tropes and reach a level of success that you want? And so I guess you're breaking those down, right, by including the fitness.
Yeah, and it's like, and the craziest thing is like, with the family and the faith and the fitness, and then we talk more about finance, but like the fitness part of it, I thought we were gonna have big blowback, and I used to be a big dude, I used to be a real big dude. Dang. And I just, I said one day, like, I need to change, I need to change. I lost over 100 pounds, right? Wow. And congrats. I got to a point where it's like, people start taking me more serious. It was crazy. Is like people start taking me more seriously when I lost all the weight, right? And I tell people all the time, you're a walking billboard, right? You got my company's name on your chest. You got the company's name that you work for on your chest. It's on your van. Like we're walking billboards. Yeah. So why can't we look good at the same time? Yeah. When you go to that customer's house and you say, hey, like not only is this going to take care of you, but I'm going to make sure and put in a plan in place that we will be your people forever. And when you look them in the eye, right, and you shake their hand and you're just like, out of shape, you big blob, it's like, are they really going to take you seriously? No. And so it's like, but if you're in shape, right, and they can tell that you go and work out, and they can tell that you do those things, like, okay, I'm gonna take this dude seriously. Like this guy is a walking billboard. And you
didn't get a whole bunch of backlash when you introduced that?
What's crazy is we got more people involved and active in the business than ever before.
Really?
Yeah. Like when we introduced all of our whole entire training program, it's like we used to have trouble getting guys to show up for work on time. We introduced a training program that involved the fitness and all this stuff, right? And it's a non-mandatory meeting that starts an hour before work starts.
Oh,
everybody shows up.
dang. That's
I mean,
amazing.
everybody taking notes, involved. We do, we go over sales objections. We do all of the stuff that these guys need, and it's not a mandatory meeting.
Yeah.
And all of the guys show up to it.
Well, it shows that you care. I mean, that's the craziest thing too. When you put people's feet to the fire, it shows that you care, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys, it makes sense. Like if you could build a culture around it, sales is sales. You can sell anything. I mean, literally, my wife bought. This guy came and knocked on the door and sprayed out our trash cans. And normally she would never like make a decision like that without me. Or she'll never buy anything from a door-to-door guy without me being there, because I'm a door-to-door guy, right?
Yeah.
She legit did it, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, well, it was cheap, and he was here, and they stink, and it just made sense. I'm like, okay, there you go. Like, and so it's funny. You could sell anything, but it's the idea of like being with like-minded people, being a part of a culture, being a part of something that you believe in, that will help you take you from just a normal sales guy to kind of the next level. And that's the goal, huh?
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is. If you just, I tell my guys, consistency is the biggest key to everything, and having a structured day to day, right, allows you to be consistent. Right. And I tell them all the time, it's like, guys will come and tell me, oh, like, I have a routine. I'm like, okay, show me your routine. Well, it's like, I have it up in my head. I said, doesn't work like that. I said, if it's not written down, it never happened. Show me your routine, right? And I'll show you where your holes are. Right? I learned something, very valuable lesson on my mission, right? Planning, nightly planning. We had a nightly planning session every night, right? It's like, okay, what are we going to do tomorrow? And then when we had the plans, okay, what if those plans fall through? We need to have backup plans, right? And those backup plans allowed me to go through. And so now I have a nightly planning session, like with myself, right? Sometimes I have it with my wife when we're doing a lot of stuff, vacations, right?
Yeah.
She hates it, right? Because like I'm like, okay, planning. I got 4 kids. It's like, how do we plan chaos, But if we have a basis of where we want to do and what we want to accomplish, like now you have something to gauge yourself off of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the crazy thing is that people go through life thinking that they're planning enough, or like they have enough things to plan. I didn't realize what planning was until, his name is Reef Coleman. He actually lives down in Scottsdale, and he has an amazing business, and I had him on the podcast. And while we were looking at scheduling it, I got a glimpse of his schedule from his assistant, and he has it broken into 15-minute increments.
Yeah.
His entire day. So there's something that's filling every 15 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I was like, there's no way that's sustainable. So I asked him, like, dude, you got to show me more of this. And he showed me a couple more pages. I'm like, holy crap. He's like, yeah, I'll change it every once in a while. Like, I'll pivot. I'm like, oh, but I'm consciously doing it. Like, if I'm going, let's say a meeting goes longer, I'm conscious that it's taking an extra half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Or if I decide I want to stick with the project for longer, like, there's just like, he has to plan in downtime, for example. He plans in meditation. He's like, otherwise it doesn't get done. And that just was a huge eye-opener for me. I'm like, well, I thought I planned, but I do not plan like that guy. And there's always room for improvement.
Yeah. And like, time is the most valuable commodity that we have, So if you're not using your time correctly, time's using you. So it's like, one of the greatest books ever is, Buy Back Your Time, Dan Martell. And it's like, it's so true, right? And it's like, I wish I would have used those principles. I tell people all the time, it's like, frick, if I'd had a mentor and I'd had known earlier on, and that's what about the coaching industry. It's like, I have a coach, right? I coach for other people. And it's like, and that my coach has a coach, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, you need somebody to be able to report to and say like, hey, this is what's going on. You need somebody to be able to call you out, especially like when you're a business owner, there's not very many people that call you out.
No.
There's not very many people like, hey, you didn't show up on time. It's like, if you strolled in late, like they'll be like, oh, whatever, he had something going on. No, like if you say you're going to be somewhere, like be there.
Yeah. It's really tough too, because when you're running a business or like a sales organization or anything, a lot of times the people who you are associating with are the ones that you are helping level up, right? I mean, it's the 30-30-30 rule, right? Or 33-33-33. You want to spend 33% of your time with people like on the same level as you, and then higher and lower, right? The idea that you want to spend time with people who are way above your belt, and then you want to spend time with people who are below. And people I think get really caught up is when they're spending way too much time with the 66% that is at their same level or below. And I had a hard time when I learned this concept first. I was like, man, that's a lot of time to be spending with people like, I hate saying below, but people who are maybe not as accomplished, younger, things like that. And what I learned from my coach is he said, no, it's not anybody that's below you. They have to have easy signs to show that they're going to be at your level one day, or they're going to be higher than you one day. They have to have ambition, drive. They have to be, show these things. Otherwise, it's not worth your time. Otherwise, it's charity, and that's a completely different thing. That's not part of the 30-30-30 rule. And so when I learned that, I said, okay, cool. And I realized actually, I was like, is it a negative thing though if I'm spending 40% of my time with people who are like higher? I'm like, and I looked at the pros and cons, and I said, well, in some ways it kind of can be, because if you're not spending enough time with your peers and people below you, and you're only spending time with people who are above you, it's kind of the same thing. It's like someone who's above you, let's say that you're talking to a multimillionaire, right? They're not going to care to get into the weeds with you about specifics. And they're definitely not going to call you out on things unless they really care about you. And good luck. I mean, those people will come by every once in a while, right? Whereas people on your same level, they have the time, right? They have a little more time. They see where you are. They understand where you are. They can call you out on a little bit better. And then they can also, get in the weeds with you about some of the details. And then the people below you, well, that's a whole different story. You're getting practice helping others achieve what they want. And therefore, you kind of learn in that process, and you yourself become a little bit elevated from that. So that's something I've learned that's really difficult, I think, for entrepreneurs when they're getting started, and sales managers when they're getting started. They spend way too much time in those bottom two sections.
Well, everybody wants to feel good, and when you have a bunch of people looking at you all the time and like, oh my gosh, like that guy is so good, like they don't ever want to say anything because like, oh, like every minute is good for them, It's like, does that really help you out at all?
Yeah.
I mean, teaching is an elevated learning, right? So it's like the more you teach, the more you learn. But at the same time, if you're not being taught at the same time, right? If you don't get those lessons from somebody else, right, that might be a little bit elevated of you or on your same level, it's like, it's hard.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the key to all of this too is what are the intentions, right? Like, why are you associating with the people on your level and below? Why are you going up and reaching out to people who have, vast wealth or whatnot, or experience? As long as the intentions are good, I think that you'll find that your actions are going to be putting you in the places where you need to be, if that makes sense. So, well, honestly, learning from your story has been fantastic. I'm curious, is there anything else where maybe like in the later part of like your sales, I mean, sounds like you have a couple of amazing things coming up as well. What are some maybe lessons that you're learning now that maybe you wish you would have known when you're maybe not even getting started, but like kind of like in the earlier stages of business?
Well, like I really wish I would have known, like little things, right? Everybody focuses on these really big principles in sales, right? Like understanding, what the need of the customer is or whatever, but like I wish I would have known like tonality and understanding little bits of what a customer is saying to me, and that would help me grow my business way more. And it would have, helped me even like when I'm talking to my guys, right? Like every day I go in there and I'm doing training, I'm selling to them, right? So they can go out to sell the customer. But like in terms of growth, I think we've been on a pretty good trajectory, figuring out what we're doing. Now we're in the process of, we're gonna open up about 5 or 6 more locations here in the next couple of years.
Nice.
In different states, and that's really gonna propel, our, it's gonna springboard our, our company and where it needs to be. But like without basic sales, without basic little things, you can never really get to where you want to be. So like understanding the basics of sales, I think would have helped me out way more.
Wow. I wish I could like scream that from the rooftops to like a lot of my guys and stuff like that. It's like when we tell you to do what seems like boring and monotonous training, it's because you can't get enough of it, right? You have to understand these things on a person-to-person level in order to scale or grow or start a business, right? I mean, if you're going to start a business, the business has to have sales. You have to sell everything about the business's sales. So if you don't know these basic things, I mean, good luck with the second part of it, right?
Yeah, like if you don't understand the very basics of sales, like the whole business side of it, it's gonna fly right by, you know.
That's
right.
right.
And we won't even get into accounting, right? But like, you know, it's just dealing with people, right? Understanding people, understanding their mood, their habits, you know, what they like, what they don't like. You know, it's like you understand that, you can get pretty far in life, right? You can read people, and it's like, you know, I tell my wife all the time, it's like, you know, I read people for a living. That's what I do.
Yeah.
It's like I go into somebody's house and they're freaking out, you know, it's like, I'm not going to freak out with them. I'm going to be like, okay, let's calm the situation down, you know. But if I go into somebody's house and they're just like, oh, there's the toilet right there, you know, like, oh, who knows what's going on. It's like, oh, okay. And then I'll kind of like amp it up a little bit. Like, hey, you know, let's get a little excited about why I'm here, you know. Yeah. It's a crappy situation, but like, hey, let's get excited about it, you know. So it's like reading who it is, you know, like if you can read people and you're a master communicator, you can do anything in life.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's winning people to your side and your cause, right? That's what the business is. And that's kind of what you're saying, reading them, getting them, communicating with them well, and winning them to your side, winning them to your cause, getting them on board with what you believe in and what your vision is to help them in that current time, what your company is all about. I love that. Well, honestly, I can tell with a leader like you at the helm that your company is going to be going crazy. So that's fantastic. And I guess if people want to find you or reach out for any advice or anything like that, is Instagram the best way?
Yeah, Instagram is the best way, you know. Okay. Ben Jordan Official. That's my Instagram tag or whatever they call it, you know. But yeah, no.
The lingo.
And we're you know, we're scaling that. We're trying to put out more and more and more content, you know. We're building a whole training platform for the trades, you know. It's going to teach that whole process that I told you about, you know. It's going to go through step by step. Hey, how do you get, you know, your technicians engaged the night before? Not, hey, when they're at the customer's door, you know. And that the whole training process, we're right in the process. I mean, we should be launching with here in the next couple months. So it's going to be next level stuff for the trades, you know, and I love the trades trade in my life, you know. And so now it's my turn to be able to give back to the trades as much as I possibly can. And that's what we're in the business of doing. So
I love that. Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to see the growth that you guys have over the next few years.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.